Welcome to the CT Educator podcast. I am your host, Karina Hogan. I am a registered CT technologist with 20 years of experience and knowledge. I help new CT technologists level up their CT training so that you can become a successful technologist. I'm also a mom and committed to sharing my knowledge and expertise to help you build your confidence, know the CT basics so that you can deliver quality patient care. So let's get into it. Hello. Welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Hope you guys are having an amazing week. Can you freaking believe Halloween is here? And yeah, this is super exciting. I love Halloween. It's one of my favorite times of the year. And that leads into Christmas, which I know lately since COVID hit, I really wasn't excited about Christmas. I've always been excited about Christmas because ever since I became a mom in 2011, that's when I had my first child, because I have a stepdaughter as well. And just doing all the things for the kids, during Christmas. Like I do a 25 days of Christmas where each kid, we'll do a separate activity and we'll do something just really special during the holiday. So I'm really excited to get back into that for my girls. They absolutely love doing that. Seeing all the Christmas lights and baking. My youngest daughter loves to bake. It's amazing. So we even do a lot of baking during Halloween as well and watch all kinds of Halloween movies. So, little housekeeping for you guys. The doors to the CT Educator program are open. I'm taking 10 spots. So, make sure you guys check out the show notes on how to apply for that program. So, it's 6 months in my container where you come in, you get a self-on-demand course portal. I teach 4 live trainings a month for 6 months that you will have access to, even the replays. You get a ton of helpful PDFs, downloads, the ebook, and course slides. You get all kinds of things in my program. You also will get Slack coaching. So Slack coaching is when you come in, I can coach you on anything that you're struggling with, you're stuck on when it comes to your CT training, exams, you name it. You come in, I'll coach you and get you up to speed so you can be the go-to successful CT tech. If that program is kind of too much for you, I do have a 90-day program where you can come in, get the basics learned in the next 90 days so that either you can be test ready or you can just feel confident while you're scanning in your CT department. So make sure you check out all those links in the show notes. So the application to the CT Educator program, that's 6 months, it'll be available in the show notes. The link to the other 90-day program will be linked in the show notes. If you need just a one-on-one course to get you ready because you just started your training, that link is also in the show notes. So go check all that stuff out. Okay. In today's episode, I want to talk about something that's super important. It is troubleshooting in CT. This is when the equipment fails and what to do. Now, in CT, we know that we do lots of high demand, high capacity exams. So our CT machines, unless you're working in outpatient, they never shut down. So they are used 24/7, 365 days of the year. So we have such high capacity and high usage in CT, which causes wear and tear on the machines. So we typically have preventative maintenance. So depending on your facility and the high demand and high capacity, typically a preventative maintenance or a PM schedule is usually every 2 to 3 months. Usually it's 2 months, depending on just how many exams you're executing, especially like at a trauma center that, I work at a trauma hospital, and the service providers come in every 2 months to go ahead and clean inside the CT scanner, inside the gantry, make sure everything's tip top, all the checks are done. If anything's out of alignment, make sure everything's, within alignment. Because what happens is that the sheets that we use create a lot of dust if you've seen it around the scanner. And that could really impact your image quality and the life of your x-ray tube. So those preventative maintenances are very important. So I would check check with your higher ups to see when they do that. I know in our hospital, they do it I believe it's every 2 to 3 months because, we're a trauma center and we got to be tip top. Plus we have 5 scanners. So preventative maintenance is very crucial when it comes to a CT scanner. It keeps the life of that CT machine going. Now, I'm going to give you some tricks. If your equipment fails, before you call Biomed, before you call GE, Philips, Siemens, Canon, Toshiba, because, that's how I learned. And just to give you some tips before calling them to see if you can fix it and, save yourself a phone call. So the first thing that I've encountered a lot is when the computer freezes, the computer console or the gantry is frozen and it's not moving. Like you can't lift the table up and down. You can't click to start your scan. So usually what I tell technologists is try to do a complete shutdown. Now I know sometimes when the computer's frozen, what happens is that you have to do a hard shutdown because sometimes computers, they think on their own and they have a different agenda, right? So usually what I tell technologists is try to do a complete shutdown. Leave the machine off for at least 2 to 3 minutes. See if it'll reboot itself and then go ahead and reboot the system. A lot of times that'll fix whatever errors, whatever frozen computers you have. If not, then that's when you need to call Biomed or the service, the vendor, and let them know what's going on. Okay. I know a lot of the CT machines, if you have purchased that in your contract where the vendor can just remote in and they can see what's going on. I know we have that capability at our hospital, and I had that capability at the previous hospital I worked at where the vendor can just go in and remote in to see what the actual problem is before they send somebody out. Now, the next thing is ring artifacts. I know sometimes we see ring artifacts appear on our image, or the radiologist will say, hey, there's a ring artifact in this exam. Sometimes what happens is that when we're running air cowls, and I've seen this a lot, when we're doing QA, I have seen techs leave the water phantom inside the gantry. Now, that's a big no-no, and I'm going to tell you why. When you leave the water phantom sitting in the gantry and you do your air cowls, it's going to calibrate to that water phantom. And a lot of times you'll see a ring around your image. So how do we clear that up? Or let's say if there's a ring artifact, how do you clear it up? Okay. So what I would suggest is take everything out, take the footboard off, anything that's within the gantry path. Make sure you take the table all out. Make sure there's nothing around it. Okay. Then run an error calibration test and see if that clears it up. And then you can do a dummy test. The dummy test we do is we take a bottle of contrast, put it on the table and scan it and see if we can see any artifacts. If you do see more artifacts, then of course you got to call Biomed and, have them fix it. So typically if you run an error calibration test, that typically clears up a lot of the ring artifacts that you might see. If not, then you have to call Biomed or get the vendor involved. But 9 times out of 10, it's an easy fix. Now, the last thing that I'm going to say, because I know some of the other stuff is a little bit more complicated and they're vendor specific, and I will talk about that a little bit. So the last thing that I think when the equipment fails, and these are the most common things, and then I'll talk about the uncommon things, is your tube heat. So let's say it gives you a prompt and saying, the X-ray tube is cold. It needs to be warmed up. Now, I'm going to tell you why this is important, okay? Because you always want to do a tube warm up and make sure that X-ray tube is warm before you scan a patient. The reason is because if you try to scan a patient while that X-ray tube is cold, it could crack the housing around the X-ray tube. And then what happens is your image quality decreases. So make sure that if you haven't used your scanner in a while, make sure you check your heat units, your tube heat, and make sure that x-ray tube is warm. It's the same principle in x-ray. We want to make sure those x-ray tubes are warm because you don't want to scan a patient with a cold tube and then have shitty image quality. Now, some of the not so common things that you might see when equipment fails, let's say if you're doing a scout and then all of a sudden it says, cannot perform exam. You keep hitting, okay, continue, whatever. 9 times out of 10, it's because x-ray tube has gone out and it can't initiate that scan. We see that quite a bit, especially if the x-ray tube hasn't been changed, and you'll know because you won't be able to initiate that scan where biomed has to go in and, it has to be replaced. And then that's an all day, replacement and an all day calibration. So it's like an 8-hour job. So that is not an easy fix. That you'll notice is that when you're trying to acquire a scout and you can't. So you have to call biomed. The second thing is if you start to see like streaks on your scans, streaks, on different types of images, usually it's because the detectors are going out. That's usually an indication that it's going out. And usually if a detector or the detectors go out, a lot of times you can't even scan. You can't initiate the scan at all, okay, because it won't allow you to. So a lot of times you'll see like it's almost like a black mark, I want to say. It's been a long time since I've seen one because usually at the facilities I work at, they keep those CT machines pretty tip top. But it's been years since I've seen it. So it usually looks like just a streak and it just diminishes your image quality and it just looks like crap. That's when you know the detectors are going out, which there's not an easy fix for that. It has to be fixed by the vendor. Okay. So those are some tricks and some things that you can see, or, if it happens when the CT equipment fails, what you can do on the simple fixes and what to do when you get some pretty major failures. Okay. Hopefully this episode was super helpful for you guys. As always, check out the show notes. Make sure you guys come and join my program, get in on my programs because I teach some very valuable stuff. So hope you enjoyed this episode and I will chat with you guys next week. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you would like to share your CT experience, have an interesting story to share, or need help in your CT training, please email me your questions at contact@thecteducator.com. Follow along on Instagram at the CT Educator, also on Facebook at the CT Educator. Don't forget to like, share, leave a 5-star review, as this will help support the show and it'll reach all of you that need guidance. Thank you for listening and happy scanning.